Welcome everybody to ExtraNormal Podcast. Alongside me is not my wife. She's out for the first time. We're gonna miss her dearly, but she's here in spirit, and she'll be with us next episode. But alongside me across the county is Perry. Perry, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? How's everyone doing tonight?
Good,
Great. Okay.
great. You talking to me? Or
Glad to be
talking to
here.
the general masses?
Talking to the people out there, not to
Oh,
you
the
really.
people, the
I already
people in
know
the
how you're
universe.
doing. Already
And
talked
we
to you.
also have a special guest, the one and only Jordan from Campfire Tales. Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
So well. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, right. This is going. And so I could tell because I took a little dip, and you're in full spooky season for. I hate to use that word now. I think I'm gonna ban spooky season. By the way, can we ban
Yeah,
spooky season? What are we gonna fucking call it? Halloween season?
I suppose so.
Yeah, whatever. We're gonna
We
call
could
it.
just go old school and call it October.
We could the month of October.
Yeah.
We'll workshop it. We have Jordan who is actually doing a whole month of October full of Halloween related episodes. We have our monsters, right? You're doing monsters for the month of
Yep.
October, which is fucking amazing. It's right up my alley. First episode, the most recent episode is werewolves. So if you haven't checked it out, tune into that first episode on werewolves, and that's a good primer. And then go backwards from there and enjoy.
Oh yeah.
But what we're going to be talking about today is the fucking scumbag of scumbags, Albert Fish. One of the most notorious serial killers, one of the most old timey serial killers. I mean, I think we're going on. We're just about at the century mark from his first escalation. Let's call it escalation because he was always a fucking creep. But we're hitting a century mark from his first crimes that gave him the notoriety that he had. So
Yeah.
who is Albert Fish? So for the people who don't know, who aren't morally bankrupt like us, who don't delve into this world, who was Albert Fish? Albert Fish was a gentleman by the name of his God-given name, his Christian name, as they probably would say back then, was Hamilton Howard Fish, born in 1870. Something of note of his parents: his dad was 43 years elder of his mom. What was his mom name? I think Aura.
Yeah.
Yeah, her name is Aura. But his dad was 75 years old when he had him, which is some real Sean Connery shit right there. Yeah, so he was old. He was up there. So Albert Fish was born in, I believe he was born in. Was he born in Delaware?
It says right here.
I
See,
don't remember. New
can
England,
we?
somewhere in New England.
So I let me. I'm gonna say something right now. The Eds, I was delved into that world. I was looking at interviews. Albert Fish was tough for me. I'm like, I want to research this guy as little as fucking possible because
Yeah.
he's a true dirtbag. He's like the
No.
dirtbaggiest of dirtbags.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was born in Washington D.C. actually, our wonderful capital. His good old English, Scotch, Irish stock. Nothing true extraordinary. Um, Again, his dad was 75 years old. Led a normal life until I believe he was 5. Just kind of doing his thing, being a kid. Being a kid in a family, one thing of note is being a kid in a family full of people with severe mental instabilities. His brother was in an asylum. His mom was recorded as having hallucinations. His uncle, I believe, was what they called manic back in those days. And I don't have a psychology. Jordan, do you know what manic is? I don't know what fucking manic is.
Yeah, honestly, I think that the closest thing to that is probably he had like either severe like ADHD or he may have had like manic depression.
Got it. So
Yeah.
it seems like it was almost like manic. It feels like manic back then, like was a catch-all. Like
Yeah. It
he's
was an
got
umbrella term.
yeah, he's got a screw loose somewhere. We don't know what it is, but it's loose somewhere. So his uncle had those. So he was born, even though he had a relatively kind of what you would see as a generic, well-to-do life. His father made a decent wage. I think he was a steamboat captain,
Yep.
which is one of the coolest fucking old timey things you could ever be, is a steamboat captain, like fucking straight out of Mickey Mouse, like
Yes.
awesome. Issue is, what happened to Dad? Perry, do you know what happened to Dad? 5 years in, take a guess. 75-year-old man.
Um,
Take a guess.
he had passed away.
That's a good guess. He
Solid.
he It's not bad. If you're gonna take any guesses, especially back then. I mean, you didn't. 80 was a good run. That's
Yeah.
a good run. Um, yeah. So dad passed away when he was 5, and that just spiraled everything out of fucking control. Apparently, like you could essentially back then, and it's still sort of this way, but then it seemed much easier to essentially rent your kid out to an orphanage, right?
Yep.
Because mama, she didn't really have any kind of income, stable income, so she basically sent young Howard at this time. I believe he still went by Howard. Howard at that time, she sent him to an orphanage, which seems like back in that day, if you want to wreck your kids, send them to an orphanage.
Yeah.
That's a good way. If they're not manic yet, just go in and send them to orphanage, and they're there for you. Like they'll be there in an instant.
Yeah, they were
And
basically just work camps run by religious zealots.
yeah, yeah, religious zealots who seem to enjoy punishment.
Oh,
They
yeah.
would glee in punishment. It was like I don't know what it was. And Jordan, do you want to get into like his summer camp experience at the orphanage?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think this is like the most pivotal moment in his life. It's the most formative, right? Because this is that time in like a boy's life also where you're connecting the dots on what sexuality is, right? And he's exposed to all this like public punishment, all this all this masochism and sadism from the enforcers, sort of. And
Perry, silence your cat. We're talking about
Let me go give him some food.
orphanage abuse.
You
I
get
think we
hungry
all
every
might. It might be
time,
one of it
every
because
time.
I noticed, Jordan. I noticed you have a cat in the background.
oh yeah,
I got a cat running around here sometimes, so it's like it might be a game of which cat is it at one point. Yeah, but yeah, you're totally spot on. Like those years are formative, and one of the things that I noticed that one of the things I read that doesn't really it seems early. There was reports that he would get beaten, right,
mm-hmm.
and he would get an erection, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
that one of the reports?
Yep.
That seems awfully young.
At like 7 years old.
Yeah, that seems like you are really formulating some strong, correlations between this big physical abuse and sex. I mean, that doesn't seem. I can't honestly. I can't remember when I got my first erection. I really
Right.
can't. But I think it was after the age of 7 or whatever. I'm gonna say it was after the age of 7. So he is
I
formulating
think
this shit.
they probably happen like physically at that age, but like I don't think it's really connected to any sexuality for most people.
Yeah, you're
I
not
think
looking
really
at.
what makes the difference with Fish is like he was a born sociopath.
Yeah,
So like on top of how fucked up he is by his childhood this time, like it's intermingling with the sociopathy,
yeah,
right? And that's how you get this monster, basically.
real monster. Perry, can you tell me what was the age you first got your boner? What was? Do you remember when your first boner was?
Yeah, I do.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Because I don't. For the
do.
record, I do not. I don't remember
Do
a
you
lot
like
of my
mark your
childhood.
calendar?
No, because I don't
Today's the
remember
day.
it exact. I remember the place.
Will you tell me you weren't being
I
beaten?
remember-
Because that would be.
Oh God.
I need to check on you. You're off the podcast.
No, I remembered. I don't remember
Okay.
the date, but I remember.
It must have been an embarrassing. I don't know if you want to
No,
get
it
into it.
wasn't
I don't care if you
embarrassing.
want to get into it. It must
It
have been
was-
embarrassing.
No, it was
if
just.
you remembered it.
To me, it was just the weirdest thing that ever happened.
Well, because it's
That's it,
surprising. So think about that. That's a good
I didn't know
actually
these things
segue.
happened.
So think about being. What Perry? You stepped away for a second, but what we're talking about is the fact that Fish started to correlate this abuse with his sexuality, right? With his sexual preferences, and so he at the young age he started getting erections when he got beat, and so just imagine that headspace where, like you said, like when you first get that, that first happens to you, the surprise, just general surprise, if you're in a supermarket or in your bed or whatever. Imagine the surprise. You're 7 years old. Let's say he was at 7. I don't think they marked the day. I don't think
Mhm.
the orphanage marked it on the calendar. But you're not only surprised that this is happening to you, but it's also the shock of it happening when this is happening, when you're literally getting beaten. That's a good old stamp on your brain. That's a big stamp on your brain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was in the orphanage. So Mama Aura managed to get her stuff together. She managed to get a job, and she managed to have the ability to get good old Albert out of the orphanage.
And
And
that
one of
only
the
took like what, 3 or 4 years?
he wasn't in there that long.
Yeah.
He wasn't in there that long. That's yeah. He was, and so that's a good point that you said with the fact that he's a sociopath, because I think with the 2 episodes we talked about on the previous 2 episodes, the 2 Eds,
Mhm.
being abused doesn't mean that you're going to do this, that you're going to perpetrate this, or you're going to go you're going to escalate it like he ended up doing.
Mhm.
So it was that combo platter. We have the combo platter. We all talk about this serial killer combo platter, which is, bedwetting, something that he did.
Yep.
Mental instability within his family, so a family history of mental issues, um, and this physical abuse, and so there wasn't, as opposed to our previous 2 episodes. I don't think there was a lot. Did Jordan? Did you see any record? I don't think Mom was terrible. I think Mom had
No.
hallucinations, but I don't think Mom was bad, right?
No, the mother wasn't too bad. I mean, the worst thing she did to him was sending him there.
Yeah, that's true. She wasn't
Right.
too bad, except for the fact that she pawned him off to a fucking hellscape for 4 years. Other than that, she was great.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was, and we'll get into some of at that time, because at that time, it was something you did. If you couldn't afford your kids, you sent them to your family. You
Yeah.
sent them to grandparents. You sent them to uncles. You shipped them off for a few years at the very least, and then, but I don't think she had that. She didn't have that infrastructure. So that's just something that was of the time.
Yeah, I mean,
And
honestly, while he was in there, she was probably sleeping in a workhouse herself,
probably,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
she was, and I believe he was. I mean, it's not hard to believe, but he was the youngest, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah.
he was the last of the chain, essentially. So Mama picks him up. He gets out of the orphanage with all these imprints, with all this kind of, I hate to use the word deviance, but it fits deviance once you see what he ends up doing, right?
Sure. Certainly deviance for the time period.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that played some role in it. That's not a cop out for Albert, but I think the fact that he was essentially into, I mean, he escalated. Not that people who are into BDSM always do this,
Right.
but he escalated it beyond that. I mean, he was also happened to be a gay man, which at the time was not a thing you did,
Yep.
So yeah, he had these things like that piled on top of it. So he's out, right? And one of the things um that happened, Howard, right?
Mhm.
Howard turned into Albert. And we keep talking about Albert, but Albert didn't start as Albert. Albert started as Howard. Um and Howard decided to change his name to Albert because he kept getting called ham and eggs. By the way, I'm gonna start. Do we know where he's buried?
I'm not sure.
We should find out if he's buried. If it's not unmarked, I'm gonna start a fucking petition to change the name of his grave to ham and eggs. So if there's some chance that there's like an afterlife, I'm a faithful person, but I'm not of faith. If there's an afterlife, I hope he's looking down or looking up from hell, and he sees that his graves gets changed to ham and eggs, because he fucking hated that name. He changed it to Albert,
Yep.
because he kept getting called ham and eggs, which is it's almost quaint, like an
Yeah.
old timey nickname. Like
It is. It sounds like an old jazz musician.
oh, ham and eggs
Yeah.
on the tenor saxophone. Yeah, it does. Him playing with Bird. Yeah, no, it's totally quaint now, but at the time, man, it pissed him off. It really pissed him off. And I wish I was there at the fucking execution. So the last little fucking thing he heard was people shouting ham and eggs at him. Just
chanting it.
Just chanting ham and eggs.
Yeah.
Because chanting like you're a murderer, that didn't do anything for him.
Yeah.
That did nothing for him. He didn't give a shit. He probably enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, he got off on people being uncomfortable around him and hating what he was putting them through. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's that serial killer thing of just the once you like there's a serial killer, and we'll get into what happened when he got surprised, he got caught. I don't want to give a spoiler out in just in case you guys don't know about Albert Fish. But there's a thing of like serial killers just fucking spewing. Once they get caught,
Yep.
like true serial, like people who like have this fit of passion and they murder their wife or whatever it is, they try to cover it up. And serial killers will try to cover it up for a while, but once they get caught, man, they are an open book. They're just like, blah. Like,
Yeah.
here's my story, make me famous, essentially.
Yep, most of them are like that. I mean, you just covered Ed Kemper, right?
Yeah,
And he's like
yeah.
the master of that.
He's the master. He went on a fucking book tour in
Yeah.
prison. He went on a book. It's like an unofficial book tour. Like, the man is not short of words for Ed Kemper, and it's it's a good thing that he in some parts that he was talking, because he wrote a lot of the playbook. He is essentially a big piece of Mindhunter, like that
Yeah.
show. The person who wrote the book, that his name escapes me. But yeah, it's kind of a good thing that he started talking. But yeah, also it was for his own purpose too. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
for sure. So he gets out, right? And he starts living a life, and one of his lives was as, I think, well, here's the thing, Perry. At age 12, I want you to list maybe two of your favorite hobbies to do at age 12. Something you discovered at age 12, something you were like, oh my god, this is great. Like, do you remember anything you did? I'm assuming your boner was before age 12. So after that, what was your, was it Call
I
of
bet his
Duty?
boner was still a pretty big high on the list at 12.
It was like he was really getting into it. That was like,
Yeah.
he watched the first movie of his boner, and now he's like full on board. Like, he's like, it's
Mhm.
MCU universe for him. Okay, so you don't know anything. Did you have any hobbies, Jordan, at 12 that you kind of
I was
discovered?
just getting into sports back then. But
Sports,
when I was
okay.
12, I was
That's
into
good.
Sports.
That's
That was
good.
about the time I got adopted too, so
Got it.
that
Yeah,
was a big.
that was a big for you. Well, Albert Fish started getting into that. I'm gonna butcher the name, but I'll give you a description. Urolagnia. You know what urolagnia is, Harry?
When you like drinking piss.
There you go.
Nailed
You
it.
got, yeah,
Cheat sheet.
Perry. Okay, Perry.
Yeah.
We need to fucking talk. Sorry, Jordan, you're experiencing this, but you said you remember when you got your first boner very early on, and you like drinking piss. So that's two. Your Venn diagram is in the center with two of Albert Fish's qualities. So you're
Wait,
on
did I say I like drinking pee?
you're on thin ice. Well, you knew what it was really, really quickly.
I have a cheat sheet, you little motherfucker.
So I'm sure on your cheat sheet you have coprophagia.
Yes, I do.
What is
And I know
that,
what the-
Perry?
And actually, I work at a pet store, so we come across that a lot. Because dogs will do it too.
Mm.
Okay, got it.
Well,
work at a school,
technically, Albert Fish's version of this is when you connect it to sexual feelings,
Yeah,
right? So it isn't just drinking piss and eating shit; it's getting off on it.
yeah, he wasn't doing it for health purposes. This wasn't like a
Nah.
West Hollywood like fucking diet. He was like, no, this is how I jerk off. This
Mhm.
is how it happens. Like, yeah. Perry, I got a question for you.
Yeah. Go
Your
for
cat. I got a question for you. Your cat. That's my only question.
It. Wait,
Would you?
Oh,
What? Is there any money? Like, this is the age-old question. How much would it take? How much would it take for you to just take a spoonful?
oh, I don't know.
And we're talking about an Arnold Palmer, not just.
An Arnold
We're talking about
Palmer.
both ends.
I
How
don't
much?
know.
There's a price tag for everybody.
Like
There
blended
is.
with a whisk.
Maybe half a mil. Maybe I don't know.
Wait, that
But-
seems low, Barry.
But
I don't know.
I'm-
Does that seem high or low? I feel like I might do it for $500,000.
No, I was initially gonna say $1 million, but
You're talking about a real weirdo. So that real weirdo probably is going to have a lot of expendable income.
Sure.
You're talking about a Steve Ballmer, a Bill Gates, a Elon Musk, one of
Okay.
those high grade weirdos.
fuck that shit. If you're saying like that, then that's like $2 million.
2
That's the
million.
lowest.
Jordan, do you have a price tag
Okay.
on that, or is
So
it no
you're
go?
so you're just talking like a spoonful, like you just scooped up some brownie batter.
A spoonful. You have to have a spoonful, but you cannot. You have to keep it down.
Okay.
You can't like. It's not like a. It's not like you're like a sommelier at a fine
Right.
restaurant and you're spitting out the wine. You're
Right.
you're consuming that wine. You're getting drunk
Okay.
off that Duke.
Okay. I have a pretty strong stomach. I think I think I could handle it for 1 million.
That's
I
good.
do for. I mean, if you're in your premise, right, where it's some crazy bored billionaire, yeah, I'd probably gouge him for like 5 million if he was really into it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the lowest would be 1 million for me.
Yeah, yeah,
I
I'd
feel like
say
you could play hardball with him too because he's desperate for this, right? He's not gonna.
exactly.
And like, unless you sign an NDA, you have leverage on him. Be like, okay, I see your 500,000, and I see me going to the press, right? I see me
Yeah.
walking over to the press. So let's make
Exactly.
it 50 million. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
I think you'd have some leverage. So at age 12, Albert Fish, this is what he started getting into. So he's developing. So he is really becoming like this guy. Like he is into beatings. Like he's into why is the word escaping me?
Masochism.
There you go.
Mhm.
Masochism. He's into masochism in a big bad way. He's now into bodily fluids, right? He's there essentially. He's there um in the masochist world, right? He's still in his own world where it's like he's still the libertarian of deviance, right? He's still, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm into this, but I'm not hurting anybody. Which in my book, like at this point at age 12, I mean it's a little young at age 12, where's mama? But if this was where Albert Fish ended, go for it. Like have at it. If you want to eat that shit for free, literally, like go for it. The issue is that wasn't it for him. That was his taste. Much like when we talked about Ed Kemper, there's with serial killers, there's escalation, right? There's the fantasy, there's the reenactment, and then it happens, right? And then it escalates to what really happened. And Perry, what do you think his first job was essentially? I mean, he had odd jobs. What do you think his first job was? Look on that cheat sheet.
Oh, okay. My guess.
Jordan, you're past. Jordan, what do you think his first job was? His first
Working as a. Oh, I got it.
Nope, you lost your chance. Sorry. Come on, it's like 2:00 in the morning on Jordan's time. We got to give. He's, what was? Let's all say it together. What was his first job?
Prostitute.
And he hobbied in molesting. Because he was not only a prostitute, right? He started farming himself out for sex, but he started exploring this molestation thing, right?
You gotta have a side hustle.
You got to have a side hustle. We all got to have hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, his was diddling little boys, but you know, that's how he lived his life. So he was young. He was very young. I think he started prostituting when he was he 18, I think, or something around there. Yeah.
It was like 17, 18 here, but like he spent a lot of his early 20s actually in Brussels, in Germany, as a prostitute, where he like specialized in flagellation, right, giving and receiving.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, he was, so at this point he's deep into the sex working scene. He's deep into molestation. He's deep into these fetishes, these uber fetishes, like these kind of ultimate fetishes where, you know, you're towing the line between, you know, when you're going to cross over. And he starts molesting boys. And one of this is another thing why Albert Fish just fucking pisses me off, is because he started choosing like who he molested. Not only young kids, which is like petrifying and horrifying enough.
Sure.
To get away with it, he chose certain kids, right? He wasn't like, I'm gonna go for run of the mill whatever I can get. He chose certain kids because he wanted to keep getting, and he started choosing. He stated that he started choosing disabled children and African American children.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being, obviously, is that it's fucked up. And look at the news today. Look at fucking Gabby Patino. If you end up hurting a African American kid or a disabled kid, especially at that time, the chances of people caring are going to be slim to none, right? So
Yeah.
this was his modus. Now that he had this thing where that was how he was going to keep going on. Are you disgusted yet, Perry? Do you want to?
Yeah, this is horrible.
Yeah,
This is he's he's fucking vile. Like
it's the tip
Albert
of the
Fish.
iceberg too.
Albert Fish. Yeah, I was gonna say Albert Fish might be the most fucking disgusting serial killer.
Yeah.
He might be. And I'm not. Obviously the gory details are the gory details, and a lot of serial killers, like look at Jeffrey Dahmer, the gory details are always going to be bad, and they're always going to be, but the victims is what makes him the fucking worst.
Yeah.
He's
Absolutely.
the fucking worst. Like he's like Perry. When I was researching this guy, like I got viscerally angry. I'm like, this guy is.
Oh, yeah, I can see why though. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like something. This is like unspoken shit that no one ever wants to think about or like ever want to speak of again. Like that's
Are you gonna be okay, Perry? You need to take a break. We should have gave it a warning, like warning.
Yeah, probably.
Graphic. But I mean, if okay, let's be real. If you're like, let me type in Albert Fish.
Yeah.
Unless you're some poor fortunate fucking parent who's like, well, my kid likes this fish show and there's an Albert character in there, so let me just type in Albert Fish.
Oh my god.
I don't think you're gonna be tuning in. So let's 30 minutes of the show. Warning, there might be graphic content.
Yeah.
So watch out.
Absolutely
everybody.
will be graphic content.
There was and will be graphic
Yeah.
content. Did we want to get into what his escalation is? Jordan, you want to get into how he transferred? So one of the things is self-mutilation. Perry, I don't know if you saw on your cheat sheet, but Jordan can tell you what they found as evidence.
Oh, man. Okay, so just for a moment, skipping way ahead to when he's arrested,
Mm-hmm.
If you're curious about the mystery of this, Albert Fish did it. So,
damn it!
When they arrested
the butler,
him,
sorry.
When they arrested him, they found, I think it was over 30, like 2-inch long, like broken in half sewing needles that he had embedded in his groin area. He would like push them in just far enough to where he couldn't take them back out. And, just to cause himself general pain and discomfort all day long.
Yeah, and might I add that this is, again, I think we talked about this in the pre-roll, but this is the episode. I think we're getting what we deserve, because the one time Brianna's gone, we're talking about sticking pin needles in our dicks.
Right.
Well, not ours, but Perry, you looking for pin needles? What are you looking for?
I need some water.
You feel
I'll be
nauseous.
right back.
So,
I didn't come prepared.
did you hear the craziest part is that they found like 29, 30 or more than 30. The craziest part is they speculated that wasn't it, right? The speculation was that was the extent. That wasn't the extent of it, because some of them they thought may have dissolved.
Oh yeah.
So
They
those are just like the
over time.
leftovers. Yeah, that's like essentially like how fossils, like the only certain amount of dinosaurs they have to fall in the fucking tar pits. Like these needles had to survive. So God knows how many there was out there just fucking.
Yeah, I mean, his son reported that like they first walked in on him doing that, like shoving needles into himself. I think like 20 some years before he was arrested. So he'd been doing it for decades.
This whole, like, there had to be like this alludes to like a certain culture like back then, where it was like the sheer amount, because he's on record, I don't hope this is not a spoiler too, he's on record to say what he had children in every state.
Yeah.
Right, so that means it was hundreds. He was like the Catholic Church essentially.
Yeah.
And nobody, like, he was arrested, right? But he was arrested for larceny.
Yeah.
Like he molested hundreds of children, but he got first booked for stealing something essentially. Like, it's insane to think, not like, let's say 2% of those people talked. It's 2 kids. Like, this guy was, like you said, he got walked in on. The kids weren't like, hey, like, let's call somebody. I'm sure they were in a bad position where they couldn't call somebody, and you didn't talk about it. And we can get into why they felt isolated in that regard because we'll get into his marriage and kind of oddly how he was as a parent, which
Yeah.
is very jarring too in a
Yeah, it
different way.
is. It's shocking. No,
So
but, like, I wanted to touch real quickly, you made a really good point about his victim choice early on, right? Because you hear people talk a lot about, like, the less dead, right? Because a lot
Mhm,
of serial killers, they choose, like, people in sex work and minorities and people in bad neighborhoods or runaways or
mhm,
people that, they aren't gonna be front page news when they go missing,
sure.
right? And this is like a perfect example. It was even more extreme at this time period because, like, the sad fact is, if a young black child from an orphanage goes missing, a lot of the times they're just thinking like, "Oh, one less mouth to feed."
Very
Like,
much
and
so.
that's just how those places were run. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's terrible. It's awful, and it's just and I feel like especially because of I don't know what it is. I mean, we're beyond the point where I mean, we're obviously well after the Industrial Revolution. Like we should be factoring children in a little more, but children were fairly expendable back
yeah,
then. I mean, you had I mean, again, getting back to Albert Fish. Albert Fish was named Albert Fish eventually. He went by Albert Fish because his one of his brothers died.
yeah,
And you had a lot, and this wasn't like now if a brother dies, it would be like, oh my god, this is horrible. Like it's a lot of trauma. And that back then it's like, well, your brother Albert, he passed away. He was the one who didn't make it.
yeah,
That it's insane how expendable just expendable children were in general, let alone like you said, if you're a black child, if you're a disabled child, like
yep,
you were a burden.
yeah,
I mean, it's awful. And that's one of the things that gets me so upset about serial killers is that if they fought the mountain from Game of Thrones, or if they fought the Rock and they ended up murdering, you wouldn't be like good on you, but you'd be like,
right,
okay,
right.
you did that, congratulations.
Honorable.
But they honorable. You shouldn't have done that. The Rock's an American treasure,
Yeah,
but
of course.
good job though. Like we're gonna have to
Mhm.
put you in jail, but good job. Like these serial killers, they just choose these like soft targets, and it's just like it's so pathetic, and that's what makes me so angry. It's just so fucking pathetic. It
Yeah.
truly is pathetic. Um, so we won't wait for Perry. We'll just pretend like the clown is him. We'll pretend like Krusty's him. So Albert Fish is living his life as a prostitute. He's out and about, like you said. He went overseas. He did that. I believe at the age of 28, Mama Fish decided it was time for Albert to get married, and so he gets married to I think she was 9 years younger than him, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was 9 years younger than him. Her name is escaping me right now. What's her name?
Anna Mary Hoffman.
Annie Mary Hoffman. Ooh, that's such an old timey name. I love it.
Yeah.
Anna Mary
You must see
Hoffman.
the bonnet.
Just picture her on a prairie right now.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so he marries her, and I'm sure she knows about his transgressions, right? We know she knows about his transgressions because he wasn't, I don't picture him. I picture him trying to hide it vaguely, but him also being like, well, if I get caught, like if the kids walk in on me, whoops, but I'm not
Yep.
gonna like be heartbroken and realize what I've done and reevaluate my life. So she knew. The most amazing part, just getting a little bit into their marriage, is that lasted 19 years. Right? We're
Yeah.
thinking about this serial killer, right? Whenever we think about serial killers, it's amazing how we always think about serial killers. We kind of almost time capsule them right into their murders, right? We
Mhm.
have the lead up that is almost like a appetizer platter that tries to explain away what they did, but a lot of like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, like all these people that they're kind of encapsulated in their kind of murder spree period. And so the crazy part about Albert Fish is he led this life, right? He was married for 19 years, and he committed atrocious crimes on kids, but it wasn't a serial killer's crimes, right?
Right.
He wasn't Albert Fish as is most famous, right? He was doing all the awful things he was doing without leaving bodies behind, right?
Right.
For 19 years, right? she Anna stayed with him until she decided that she'd had enough of. I mean, she had to know, right? And I think I think there's some speculation that the reason why is because she knew, like, and she at that time you didn't have a way out, so you just kind of stuck around with it, and that was your breadwinner, and that was your father, your kids. You just kind of stuck around, but she found a new man who actually, I believe, he was living with them, right?
Yeah, he was one of the a boarder in their
Yeah, he was a
home.
boarder. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So he was shacking up before he started shacking up, right?
Yep.
So, you want to get into what she ended up doing to Albert?
No, I think she definitely knew. I don't think he bothered hiding it at
No.
all. I think especially if you consider the time period, right? This is like right at the turn of the century.
Mhm.
Like households were run by men, right?
Yeah,
He wasn't worried that said that she was going to go tell someone or that, you know what I mean?
yeah.
When they got married, she was his
Mhm.
essentially, legally.
Sure.
So, and if you listen to reports of his future wives, because he actually had two more wives later in
Mhm.
life, um, man, I just like I can't get over how exhausting it would be to be Albert Fish's wife. Like,
Yeah,
this is not a guy who like wants that weird special thing on his birthday. Like,
sure.
he has to have this shit every single time.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, how exhausting would that be for someone who wasn't into any of it?
Agreed. Yeah, no, totally. And the thing is too is that one of the things I read is that he would primer the wives. Like he would basically say, "I'm into this. Are
Yeah,
you into this? Because I'm not marrying you if this is not your thing. I'm not
right. If you
gonna.
can't handle this,
If you can't handle the chocolate ice cream, I'm not going. I'm
yeah,
not settling for vanilla. Like this is my thing."
yep,
Um, yeah, he would definitely. So yeah, he had. So she knew it, and so that being Anna knew it, and so she left with this new man. She ended up taking everything, you know, probably partially because she probably felt like she needed it, and also too, she's probably
yeah.
like fuck you.
No, she
Because
took
our thing,
everything except their 6 kids.
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
like, I'm taking the couch, but I'm leaving the kids behind. These little
Yep.
fuckers are yours.
Man, can you
Like,
imagine spending 20 years with Albert Fish and then thinking, "I'll leave the kids with him."
yeah, that's a
Like,
good idea.
my god.
What's a few needles in your groin? Like, it'll be
Exactly.
fine. Kids are resilient. Like, it's
Yeah.
just, and this is the brain twister. Literally, the brain twister is that by all accounts, he had his kids smack him, right? He had the studded paddle or whatever it was. He
Mhm.
had his kids definitely do stuff to him to get his rocks off. But by all accounts, he didn't abuse his kids,
Right.
which is insane to think about. Like, you have 6 victims in the house. Like, it's like an alcoholic who, like, has a liquor cabinet in the bar, like,
Yeah, and doesn't touch it.
and doesn't touch it and ends up going to the bar every day. Like,
Yeah.
it's insane. Thankfully for the kids, like, thank God for the kids. Um,
I
Albert
think
poor
I actually have a theory about that because, I mean, I can't really attest to why he why he didn't indulge, for lack of a better term,
sure.
why he didn't indulge in his own children when they were like prepubescent, but his sons were like a foot taller than him and like 50 pounds heavier than him by the time they were teenage boys.
Good, beat his ass.
Right.
Like, it's just like, yeah.
And and I think Albert Fish had a weird thing with girls. I think like later on we'll see like when when we talk about the crime that he actually gets convicted for. I think a lot of that has to do with like a guilt that he honestly felt around it being a girl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, when you look at Grace, like, Grace,
Mhm.
this is foreshadowing for fucking Grace, like, but Grace, his psychology was so bizarre. Like, because we'll get into it when we get into that case, because he definitely his what his MO was boys, right?
Yep.
Young boys, right? It wasn't girls. So it's very fascinating how Grace, the poor soul, ended up being in the clutches of him, because we can get into it, but yeah, we'll get into that whole psychology, that bizarre psyche. He was a conundrum. So he had this marriage, 19 years. Anna left, single dad, and I think that's kind of what led him to start escalating even further, right? I think that he didn't do any of the the murders. He obviously committed violence against kids, but he didn't do any of the murders until after she left.
Right.
And for the record, just to one aside, is that technically, um, Albert Fish committed polygamy because
Mm-hmm.
he was never officially divorced
True.
to Anna. So
Because he never saw Anna again after
she
she
just took
left.
off. She
Yep.
just took off. Good for her. Like
Yep.
I just wish she would have taken the kids, because even if okay, so say in the perfect world where all the kids were safe and they didn't get harmed or whatever in that way. The fact that you're whatever age when whatever the varying ages of the kids when it was revealed that he was who he was. The fact that you live with that person for that many years and that person raised you has got it. Like your brain's fucked for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
You,
Absolutely.
you trust is gone. Like any trust you had towards anything is basically gone. So I wish that Anna would have taken the kids, and so they could have been like, hey, like we lived with that weird Albert. Like Albert was our dad, but we left when we were 6 or
Right.
whatever.
The oldest
Just fucked up.
son's name was Albert Fish Jr., for fuck's sake.
And
He
Albert
had to
Fish.
be he had to be Albert Fish Jr. for an entire lifetime. Like,
Well, it's on record that Albert Fish Jr. hated his dad.
mm-hmm.
Hated his dad. And this piece of shit, before we get into those crimes, this piece of shit, I don't know if you saw this, Jordan, but he scolded his daughter for still talking to Albert Fish Jr. He said, you need to stop talking, because he wrote letters to his daughters. Because his daughters, it seemed to be his daughters, like, and this is creepy how this fell in line. His daughters seemed to be, knowing that he's a serial killer, they seem to be have more compassion for him, or have a more kind of sympathy, lingering feelings for him as a dad. The sons, you okay, Perry? Did you get the needles in? How many did you get in? 29? You going for the record? 30? Oh, don't worry, Perry. You think you think your dick feels a little weird now. Wait till we talk about Keaton.
Oh man.
Okay? You just grab a bowl of cereal, grab yourself some sausage, eggs and sausage, and then Perry, what we're talking about is that so Albert Fish, I don't know if you know, but Albert Fish was very old when he got arrested for murder. And it was 6 years after his last murder, so you can do the math backwards and realize that Perry's gone. Albert Fish was very old, which means, and one of the reasons we're doing the math is because he was married to his wife for 19 years. A very long time, committing awful acts, but not murder, right?
Right.
So how old was he do we have an age when he started? I mean, escalation already happened, but when he met Keaton, how old was he? I know Keaton was very young.
It was I think that was what, 1919?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was very
49.
49 years old. I would never commit these acts, right? Because of moral reasons, but just the idea of being like a 60-year-old, let's say after Keaton, being a 55-year-old dude and doing all this shit, that sounds exhausting. Like this guy was just fucked. Like, it's awful. So anyways, his wife left. He still had the kids. Nothing happened to the kids, thank God. And he was doing his thing, still committing these awful acts. Like, he didn't. Let's not fool ourselves. And like, the whole time, he's had a long lifetime of being a despicable fucking scumbag. Right? He is the worst.
Yeah.
But he doesn't start leaving again. Like I said, leaving bodies behind. until much later in life, and that started with Keaton. And let me grab his first name if anybody can help me out with his first name, because his first name lost me.
Yeah, I always forget his first name too.
Yeah, you know. What is it? These are his. Where's his? Where's your cliff notes when we need them, Perry?
I'm bringing it up right now.
I know the second victim was Beatrice Keel. I forget what Keaton's first name was.
Yeah, so and we'll find it. He Thomas Keaton. That's his name. So he met this very young. Speculation is he was mentally disabled. I don't think there was ever really confirmed, but the heavy speculation is that he was mentally disabled. He met this guy and they started going together. They started hooking up. 10 days into the relationship, he tells Keaton that he wants to go to this barn. He gets Keaton in there, and I believe he locks him in, right? Mm-hmm. I think he locks him in. He locks him in and proceeds to tie him up, and for 2 weeks tortures him. Completely tortures him. And Albert Fish decides that he's had his fill, right? And he's gonna do the last hurrah, and he wants to torture and kill, and this would be his first murder victim, would be Keaton, and he decides that he wants to do this. Like, it's in his head to do it. The only thing that stops him from committing this horrific act is that he decides it's a little too warm. It's a little too warm, and that's going to create a smell. Mm-hmm. So, Perry, what would you speculate he would do in that case? Like, he knows that he's torturing. He knows that. I mean, if it weren't for, I mean, I would imagine Keaton, one, had to be probably ashamed of his sexuality, and two, had to be partially mentally disabled for Albert Fish to even think about doing this instead of murdering him. But what do you think Albert Fish did in response to him kind of getting cold feet? Not because he wasn't like, this guy's a great guy, I don't want to do this. Him getting cold feet because he thought he'd get caught. What do you think his answer to that problem was?
I mean, I feel like it involves like a freezer or something, but...
No freezer.
No?
Maybe a cleaver. No freezer. Jordan, you want to tell him what he ended up doing to poor Thomas Keaton?
You said, well, then what was the point of saying it was hot? It was too hot outside.
That's what caused him not to murder him. He didn't murder him because of the heat. No, he did something else.
He attempts to castrate him. Right?
He got halfway there.
Yeah. And what he said was he couldn't take even that screaming was too much even for him. The screaming. The weird thing about that event is, like, reportedly a lot of it was consensual, right? Like, they spent a lot of that 2 weeks. They were like, they just locked themselves together and they had essentially like a 2-man orgy for like the first week, and then it stepped up.
Sure.
And then he started like getting more violent, started like cutting him and taking pieces of him off, and yeah.
No safe words back then. You just
no.
Yeah, and so Albert Fish, this is fucking, oh my god, this guy, he decides to half castrate this guy as a courtesy, as a sorry, thank you very much. He basically bandages up his wound, right? So he's not going to bleed out. And he hands. I know we were talking about how much would you need to be paid to eat. You know, he as kind of recuperation for his troubles, Thomas Keaton is handed $10 and sent on his way. $10 to live his life that way for the rest of his life. And again, like, this gets to Jordan and I were talking while you stepped away, Perry. It gets to this point, like, one of the most frustrating things sometimes about studying serial killers is when, like, it was either right in front of the cops, or it just took someone like listening to like a victim, or it took a victim speaking up, and it just doesn't happen. Like, there'd be 3 kids or 5 that would still be whole if it weren't for Thomas Keating either being too ashamed, people not listening to him unfortunately choosing someone who was more than likely disabled, so that they wouldn't have the capacity to speak up in the right way that would force police to listen. Like, it's crazy. And at this point, like, we're talking about, again, I think Jordan, you said 49 years old. We're talking about a 49-year-old man. So a lot of people were like, even if Thomas would have spoke up, they would have been like, yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Albert, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Go on your merry way. Yeah, Albert, that 49-year-old man
And
who
on
seemed
top
to
of
be,
being probably disabled or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would imagine
road.
that this is speculation, it's pure speculation. This might be speaking out of school, but I would imagine that if you were physically disabled at that time, because of the nature of how fucked up a lot of things were, like, you probably were listened to, you were probably treated as if you were mentally disabled, right? Even if you're physically disabled, you were treated as less what's the word I'm like, you're treated as basically less
Competent.
reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's competent, less reliable. So if you had like some kind of physical or even he might have had a minor disability, right? A minor mental disability that made him possibly have some learning, like to take more steps in learning and stuff like that. But because he had a minor one, the cops might have wrote him off completely because of the time,
Yep.
like everybody was essentially manic, getting back to that. So Thomas Keenan, nothing happened to Albert Fish, right? Do we know when he went to jail for larceny? It was before, wasn't it before this whole Thomas Keaton thing?
Yeah. It was I think it was just like a year or two after his first wife left.
Got it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
he went to jail for larceny. He had a good old time, because he was able to, just hang out and just be kind of a criminal and stuff like that.
He actually got a really light sentence because of the sob story he gave the judge,
Fucking
because he had been left with 6 kids and he was stealing to try to feed his children supposedly, and you know what I
like a
mean?
real Aladdin figure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is insane. That it's just crazy that it's insane to think about what leash he would have gotten.
Man, I
Kind
just
of a
pictured I just pictured Albert Fish in the Aladdin outfit, and I'm not comfortable with it.
he would have tried to fuck a boo for sure. Yeah, but he's just, yeah, I can't. He was such a frail dude too, like a little
Yeah.
piece of shit. He's just a little piece of shit.
Just like a rickety old creep.
Just a rickety old, like he was like the Slender Man essentially.
Yeah.
He was a smaller version of the Slender Man. So yeah, we jumped ahead past his prison sentence, but he did go to jail. He didn't commit any crimes in jail. He just learned a lot, and he kind of got more stuck in his ways for the worst reasons.
Yeah.
So Thomas Keenan. So this gives, essentially, even though you did say that he got scared off by the scream, this gave him the taste,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
This sparked,
Mhm.
this there was no turning back from this point. He was fully on board with the horrific crimes he would end up committing. And he ended up committing, I believe, 3 murders. Francis McDonald,
Mhm.
uh, who was strangled with his suspenders. I believe he was the one. Was he the one who had a cop for a dad?
I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
I think he had and so his dad is like a good on his dad. He he said no. Whatever case I'm on, I'm going on this one. Like, unfortunately, he couldn't find his son alive, but this does, and this is not a marker of his crimes because he ran out of time, right? His what we would see later on in terms of him getting his rocks off didn't happen with Francis McDonald because he got spooked. He was in the woods. He got spooked.
Yep. He had to
So
rush.
yeah, he had to rush. So he didn't he didn't get in his normal awfulness. Um, so that's Francis McDonald. Do we know when the cannibalism started? Spoiler alert: he's a cannibal.
Um.
Was because Francis McDonald, he didn't get a I know that there, I read that he, and it's just so fucked up. He started with his kids, right? Not humans, but he started giving his kids raw meat. Like,
Yeah.
as like, this is my thing, kids. Like, we're all gonna try raw meat, and that's kind of was his like, that was his getting his toes in the water for what ended up to be cannibalism.
Yeah, his go-to meal was a raw steak on a
Oh,
plate.
God, jeez.
Like, what kind of boring asshole's favorite meal is a raw steak?
He is.
Like,
That's the thing too. It's so infuriating. He's such a deviant and a fucking snooze all at
he's
the
such a
same time.
loser.
He's
He
just
just
like
like, hmm,
he's like he's like the like he's the like the Hulk version of an incel, right? He is
yeah,
like completely fucking just like meh, like and just like trying to get his rocks off in fucked up ways and all kinds of. He's just yeah, he's despicable. So Francis McDonald unfortunately lost his life. Billy Gaffney was his second victim, 12 years old or 4 years old. Sorry, he was actually with his 12-year-old brother. I believe they were on the roof of their apartment, right?
yep,
And this is where, so I think Francis McDonald, to jump back a little bit. So one of the monikers that Albert Fish had was the Gray Man, right?
yeah.
That maybe his most popular nickname, right? And
It's
this kind of segues to what you were saying is that he, by all appearances, when asked to give a description, one woman said he had a gray mustache, he had gray hair, and then she said in every way he was gray.
yep.
And so he just blended in and he was just this, and that's, I mean, that kind of leads us to his next nickname after Billy. He also got the nickname the Boogeyman because 12-year-old Billy's brother was asked, what happened? And he said his brother said he was taken by the Boogeyman.
Yep.
And when you think about, and it's awful, it's terrifying, but when you think about it from a kid's perspective, right? Even though we see Albert Fish as this fucking feeble, pathetic, like fucking soppy old guy,
Mhm.
to a kid, he was big, right?
Yeah, he's a
And
monster.
he was a monster. He was a true monster because he was gray and he was kind of this shadowy figure, right? And
Mhm.
he just swooped up his brother. So that's how he got the nickname, the Boogeyman. He had a few nicknames. I don't know how. Maybe you can tell me since you did an episode recently on werewolves. How did he get the nickname Wolf of Wisteria?
I
It was
mean,
Werewolf of Wisteria.
because he ate people.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
I guess.
honestly, this is like the time. This is the like high point for yellow journalism, right? So
Sure.
like every paper came up with their own nickname for him. He ended up
Sure.
with like 20 different nicknames.
Sure.
But the Gray Man, like, okay, on my podcast, we don't do true crime, right?
Yeah.
We do paranormal and extraterrestrial and things like that, right?
Sure. Sure.
Cryptids. The Gray Man nickname creeps me out so much. Like it fits in with the type of stuff for me mentally. It fits in with the type of stuff that we cover on my podcast,
Yeah.
and like because there for decades after his arrest, there were people coming forward saying like giving accounts like I remember him. Like he was that guy that grabbed me that time, or he was that guy that like my mom ran him off before he could take me into the woods, and like people from all over the country
Yeah.
had reports like that, right? So it gives him this almost like otherworldly vibe. You know what I mean? Like he was literally like a boogeyman that showed up in these kids' lives. And yeah,
Yeah. And the scariest part is like one of the scariest part is we always are scared of the mask, right? Especially as kids, like we're scared of what, especially a mask that reveals itself behind it is the monster, right?
yeah,
By all accounts, Albert Fish, even for us, like the man is like, I'm not a violent guy. I'm not an alpha male, but I feel like I can beat up Albert Fish back in his
sure,
day. I'm
of
just gonna
course.
say, like, I'm not a fighter, but I feel like I can beat him up. But the thing that scares me is that he would be the type to wait till you're sleeping.
Hmm.
Like he was that's one of the scariest things about it. He was always lurking in the wings and waiting. He was an opportunist, right? He was
Yep.
just a man you couldn't trust, and he was this shadowy. And he was also for as frail. The scary part is, for as frail as he was, police initially thought he was a young guy because
Yeah.
they said no person of the age of what Albert Fish was could have done this, because it took a strength that's not going to be someone who's higher up there in age,
Yeah.
but it was him. So I wonder, I like me saying I could beat him up. I wonder if he was more mythical than I understood, that he
Right.
maybe summoned this source that could empower me, overpower me, not empower me, for the record. Could overpower me. I don't know. I mean, like, that is. Let me ask you this: what is there? I think I have my serial killer. Is he the one, the real life monster that scares you the most? Like, would
Absolutely.
inhabit?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like his story affects me more than any serial killer story and I've read a lot.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he like it just the I feel like he did more harm with his life than any other human I've ever read about.
Yeah, the thing is, he took, and it's this weird thing of just taking innocence. Like, it's just like
Yeah.
he was this, like, and people talk about, like, again, like, I know we're recapping old episodes, but people talk about Ed Gein, like, being this true evil figure, and Richard Ramirez being true evil because Richard Ramirez was so fucking random, right? I
Right.
think Richard Ramirez was pretty close, because Richard Ramirez didn't really have a preference. He would just murder because he was compelled. Like, he would choose
Yeah.
old ladies, young people. Like, he was just he was not a picky man.
Yeah.
But in terms of just true evil and just taking innocence and sucking souls, like, that's what he would do. Like, he would just suck little children's souls. Like, he was almost like a werewolf of Wisteria. Like, great nickname, way to go, newspaper. That was a great job.
Yeah.
Very catchy, very flashy. But he was almost like a soul vampire. Like, he would just suck all these souls out. I think we're in an hour and 7, so we could always do a part, because we barely even got 2 murders.
Yeah.
Do you want We could always do a part 2 on this,
Yeah,
and
we could do that.
let's do that. So, but just so we can let everybody know while they're waiting for the exciting conclusion of the biggest fucking shitbag in the 1900s,
Sure.
besides one other guy who started a big old war, in the 30s. Jordan,
Yeah.
where can we find you?
So definitely go follow my podcast on you can do that on Instagram at campfire.tales.podcast, right? You get that's for Instagram and Facebook. I'm terrible at plugs. Bear with me.
It's all good.
On Twitter, you can find us at campfire TOTSAU. That's the Twitter handle.
Just look up. I'm,
Um,
I'm sure if you look up Campfire Tales, like, you'll be
yeah,
able to hunt Jordan and Brian down. They do great work. I'm telling you, give it a listen, especially during Halloween. Beautiful setup, beautiful discussion. It's all good. And there's, what I do, if I can pay you a compliment. I like how, when you scroll through podcasts, that's a lot of the same stuff.
sure.
You guys find amazing topics that are off, sometimes the beaten path. I mean, all of it's off the beaten path, but you guys
Awesome.
find some hidden gems and stuff like that is truly innovative and appreciative.
Well, thank
So
you.
we really appreciate what you're doing out there. We're gonna have a part 2 where we're gonna delve into finally the fucking conclusion of this guy. I want to see him
Yeah.
fucking. I'm glad he got the electric chair.
Me too, man.
I hope it fucking backfired halfway through and they had to restart it.
Personally, I'm not usually a big fan of capital punishment. Like, I'm not a big supporter of it, but I do hold the belief that some human beings the world is just better without.
I don't like. I have a big. I mean, I have a big belief that it doesn't really do anything. Capital punishment. It doesn't
Yeah.
really solve any problems. Um, but sometimes it's just every so often it's satisfying.
Yep.
There
Yep.
should be, like, I think if we ban capital punishment, I would not be upset, but I think we should have an exemption list.
Yeah.
Like
Agreed.
maybe once in a century, twice in a century exemption list, like Albert Fish. Like,
Yeah.
we should have an Albert Fish rule. Like, you don't get executed unless you're like Albert Fish.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna go ahead and do that. So
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you for listening. You can find us at ExtraNormal Podcast on Instagram. You can find us on ExtraNormal P on Twitter. You can email us if you have any strong thoughts, which I would assume you do. Email us at extranormalpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.